jumper.
Oh, that's your jumper.
This is my jumper. Well, it's passing itself off as a jumper. Welcome everyone. Number 50, is that what we're looking at? Let's start in there.
Abide with me, fast for the eventide. The darkness deepens, Lord, with me abide. When other helpers fail and comforts flee, help of the helpless, oh, abide with me. Swift to its close, ends out life's little day. Earth's joys grow dim, its glories pass away. Change and decay in all around I see. O thou who changest not, abide with me. I need thy presence every passing hour, but thy grace can foil the tempter's power. Who like thyself my guidance take can be? Through cloud and sunshine, Lord, abide with me. I fear no foe, with thee at hand to bless. Ills have no weight, and tears no bitterness. Where is destiny? Where great thy victory? I triumph still if thou abide with me.
What are we going to sing next?
I think Fiona's got it.
Fiona's got one.
What's your new song? Fiona, what's that?
Oh, Shalom.
Kerry, settle.
Check.
Oh, you mean about
575.
other song?
575.
I always jumped in there with a 5.
575, and then we'll do the other one, Family of God.
Yes, that was one of the new ones we learned at camp, wasn't it? 575.
Yes.
Was that thanks to Peter or
Your
did
heart will be- oh,
This
I
is a good one,
think
yeah.
it was Peter
It
that
was
actually
Peter that-
called
it's
it.
becoming our new favourite.
What's the name one?
Yeah.
575.
575. Peter got us out of our comfort zone. So us to learn some new hymns.
That was Peter that discovered this one?
We brought
Oh,
this
cool.
one.
Pete just says numbers.
Yeah.
Let your heart be broken. 575. Oh, you can
So we introduced this from Park
Let your
Ridge.
heart be
This is
broken.
the one that Wolfgang has taught the church.
Ah, so we can thank Pastor Wolfgang.
Oh, yeah. I do remember that.
Let your heart be broken for a world in need. Feed the mouths that hunger, soothe the wounds that bleed. Give the cup of water and the loaf of bread. Be the hands of Jesus serving in His stead. Here on earth supplying
Jesus, give and give again.
I think
As we were,
Beautiful.
was
you young man.
thank you. The last verse, I think it's the second to the last line. Let your heart be broken by a brother's pain. I think of that verse. I think it's Galatians 6:2, where it says, "Bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ."
As I was particularly singing the first verse, I thought, well, this is exactly the work that Helen has been
Yeah,
doing.
yeah,
Amen.
Which we give thanks to God.
absolutely.
Amen.
Other verses in there as well, but I was thinking, wow, this is appropriate. So, yes.
There's many children we've met in India, Helen, that call you mother.
Yes, I know. Mummy
It's quite
actually.
confusing for us at first.
Confusing to me too.
Yes. All right, shall we do one more?
Family of God.
Oh, you're going to ring up?
Yes.
Ring up Suzanne. Give her a call. We'll sing to her.
What number is it?
It's not in the hymnal. You just have to learn.
Oh,
I'm so glad.
Oh, hi Suzanne, this is Fiona Perez from up in Waterford, whatever we call ourselves, group.
Hi, Suzanne.
That's Pastor Adrian.
Hi, Suzanne.
Hi, Suzanne.
Good. We want to sing to you.
You can actually Google it.
Yes. Here we go. I'm so
Of the family of God, you've been washed in the fountains, cleansed by His blood, joined hands with Jesus as we travel this song. We're a part of the family of God. You will notice we say brother and sister around here. It's because we're a family and these folks are so dear. When one has a heartache, we all share the tears and rejoice in His victory in this family so dear. I'm so glad you're a part of the family of God. You've been washed in the fountain, cleansed by His blood. Join hands with Jesus as we travel this song. You're a part of the family of God.
And
bless you.
Bless you, that was the Waterford Widgie Choir for you. That's great. Well, we hope you were blessed by that. Oh, that's good.
We looked after him for you. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Not for another 6 months.
You'll have to come up.
Thank you.
Bye.
God bless, bye.
Bye. Yeah. Yeah. Gavin's going to share something with us.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening,
yeah.
I have something I'd like to share because it's just another reminder of how good God is. Before I left on Sunday morning, had a prayer with the people in the house for Travelling Mercies and prayed for everybody actually as we were all travelling at various ways and packing up, etc. And as I headed off down Glastonbury Road, I think it's called, anyway, that first road,
Yep.
that big
The
main road.
Glastonbury. Yeah.
Glastonbury. I'm driving along and, all's good, and just came round this bend and hit, and I saw this long straight, And as I straightened up, and it was a foggy morning, misty, foggy, you know how it was, and the sun was directly at the end of the street. Wasn't slightly left, wasn't slightly right, it was at the end. Straight through the fog, it was a gold out. Wasn't a blackout, wasn't a
Gold
white
out.
It was a gold out. And you know, because that road's like 100 k's along there, and I just went, oh, I can't see anything. And I looked down, I thought, oh, slow, 90 to 80, still can't see a thing. 70, I don't know where I blew it, I don't know where like 60, and I just like, all of a sudden I saw the centre line, and it was on the left-hand side of my car. I was in the right-hand side.
You were in America.
Yeah. And then the decision. If somebody's coming, they can obviously see me because they've got the sun behind them, so they know where I was. Do you pull back into my lane if they've sort of swerved to miss, or because it was a gold out, I just could not see anything. Just like, Lord, I got to get back in my lane. I got back and sort of kept going, and then all of a sudden things sort of cleared up, opened up, and there was no one on the road, and I'm just like, praise God, He is good. And then, you know, if anybody's watched the news today, that young girl with her friends, the last thing she was caught doing, her friends were distracting her from driving with her telephone, and so she's looking at the camera like this, and the last thing you see, she goes, oh, she died. And her friends survived, and the next thing you see of the friends is taking selfies in hospital with all their cuts and bruises. I mean, these phones, I mean, people, they're all, yeah, they're distracted, they're big time distracted by their phones, and they had the father of the deceased girl on television going, I can even get to say goodbye, or I love you, or anything. And then that of course flashed back at me just how dangerous roads are. You know, and just every time we're on the road, it's a blessing of God. His angels go with us, and yeah, most certainly on Sunday morning coming back. And so yeah, glory to God.
Praise God.
Yeah, mate.
Thank you,
Can
Kevin.
I just share something briefly too?
You gonna come on?
Yeah. So on Sunday, you know, we were all leaving, and Gavin was out too early before we could start doing group goodbyes. But we started off, I think it was with John and Amelia, maybe it was the first one.
Yeah.
And apparently you guys have done this before, where we took the children's song, you know, deep and wide. And so we were doing that the entire time as people, thank you. As people were leaving, not only did we just do it, you know, for a little while, but until like we couldn't see the cars anymore.
Oh wow.
And we just repeated this and repeated this over and over as everybody was leaving, and so the numbers started dwindling down and dwindling down. And then it's just down to Ruben and myself and Craig and Danny. And Craig and Danny were the last ones to leave, and so on our way out, they actually weren't up at the house. They were down by the shed putting some stuff away. And we're driving in Ruben's spots. I mean, they're going. And Ruben just starts yelling. He just starts yelling out of the vehicle. We were just so encouraged. They were whooping and hollering, and it was really encouraging. It really just kind of put some wind in our sails, because you know it's sad. It was sad to say goodbye to everybody.
Amen.
It was. You really do. It's truly a family. And so just the little things like that make all the difference.
Amen.
That happened to us. Craig and Anna were standing up at the top of the thing, and we had Nina and Glenn in with us. And Nina was so excited about it that when we pulled down around near the olive grove, Edward had to check something at the trailer, and so we got out and we did it back to them.
It's like planes landing and taking off.
Yes,
Yeah.
we're doing the semaphore.
Semaphore.
Yes,
This is,
God semaphore.
I got this from Lavanya at 6:30 tonight.
Nice.
Hello, precious sister, and I called them just to see that they got there, and she thanks me for that, and she says, I hope you had a deep and wide drive home, and that you are recovering well. Yeah, and then she said, we have been in recovery mode. She's just, she says, I've been a bit okay, I'll read it all. She asked to pass on her greetings, but she says, I've been a bit under the weather physically, but it is well with my soul, praise God.
Amen.
There is a gentle peace in my soul. Luca's a little bit sick with a fever. Please keep him in your prayers. then she says, please pass on my love and deepest gratitude to the brethren tonight. Lavanya.
Deep
Wonderful.
and wide blessings.
Yes, that certainly felt that peace.
Mm.
That peace, just that happens after each camp that we've had. And you go home and you say, I'm just not going to watch the news for a few months.
Yeah.
I can get to Tabernacles, then I'll miss it the whole lot altogether. Just the news is really just get you on a different train
It's
of
funny.
thought, isn't it?
I walked into the house at 8:30, and the television's on, and it's just like it's like hitting a wall.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
can we just please turn that off and have
Yeah,
brekkie together?
just keep the.
Yeah.
It's a different vibration altogether.
Oh yes.
We got home to shocking news. Our doctor down here was murdered. Luping Zing from Waterford Plaza. 3 young fellas went to his house in McGregor, walked in, he was in the garage, and pulled a short-off rifle at him and shot him through the chest, killed him. He died on the way to hospital. And then we got further bad news. She was our brother's son's wife.
The nephew's one.
Nephew's wife. Anyway, they were married, separated. She married another young fellow and had twins, this other guy. So she's always still been part of the family. And that 16-year-old backed out and run over one of the 3-year-old twins and killed one just on Sabbath. So we come home to 2 lots of seriously bad news. So yeah, so the funeral's on Friday. So a little 3-year-old, like.
They were 25-week premies, so they took a lot to keep them alive to start with.
But this 16-year-old, 16-and-a-half-year-old just backed out, didn't see them doing whatever they were doing and run over both of them, but killed one.
Killed one. One's in hospital. He's in hospital.
He's in
not
just absolute shock.
Yeah, the teenager was
So yeah, so that was without even watching the news, just copying news from people saying, "Hey, did you know?" Yeah,
There's lots of
sad.
sad things happening.
Just it's sad.
And we're reminded that as those of us who believe in the Sabbath, that Isaiah 58 talks about the repairing of the breach, and we're now gathering together and honouring the Lord of the Sabbath, that there is protection. There's protection in the Sabbath,
Thank you, Lord.
and we don't want to take that for granted. Even as Moses said to Pharaoh, if we don't keep this feast, which is connected to the Sabbath, then there'll be sword and pestilence as a result. So obviously sword and pestilence, though. But I'm reminded of those things and the many blessings. Can you turn the mic? Do you just want me to speak up, Glenn? I'm talking too soft. Is it down too low?
You know what happens if you're talking too soft?
Yeah, there's a real problem. Did you get turned down?
No, it was over half.
Maybe it was.
It's over halfway?
Yeah.
Could have just went.
Is it around the wrong way? Because normally the light's in the front.
Okay, it might have been from earlier.
It's just turned around, I think.
Accommodating our online friends.
I realised one of the other things I too was about, oh no, I don't want to watch the TV or anything. I'm enjoying the peace. But
So you had the same experience?
Yes.
You just thought, oh no, I just don't want to watch anything.
but to be outside more often, because that's one of the things I really enjoy, sitting on my veranda at my tent, just looking out at the mountains.
Yes.
So I'm like, okay, Lord, I need to be more outside when I'm doing my reading or something, just to.
And being able to sit at our wonderful location there in Widgie, looking out there at that, it's just such a beautiful, just looking out there and you go, it's lovely. We had a couple of rainbows, didn't we? It's really nice. And as tends to be the custom, although I didn't see any snakes until I heard about on the day we were all leaving, and then there was one in the laundry there. It's only a short one, wasn't. That's a lot better. Okay, Glenn, good. It's good. So, yes, we have much to be thankful for. Now, before we go any further, I thought that we should have a prayer. Father, we just want to praise you and thank you for your wonderful watch care and your love towards us. Thank you for the wonderful fellowship we've had over the past week or so. And we just pray that the blessings we have received, we won't keep them to ourselves, because we want to share them with many people that are suffering or in pain, and that we want to be the hands of Jesus and to speak his words. And so, Father, we pray that you would bless us tonight as we share together and prepare to go out again, and we thank you in Jesus' name. So, just briefly, before I go on, it was we put Nina back on the plane last night and sent her back to South Africa, and it was I'm really glad she could come and visit you all. We hope to get Bester out next time.
She said she's going to put a bit more pressure on.
Yeah, he was more than willing to come, but he is the manager of a very large facility, so he couldn't get away. We're very, 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 very thankful for our friends in South Africa, and of course, Laurel and I are going back over there in September. October, end of September, October, to do some more meetings over there. But I was just thinking this evening about the series of messages that we put together, at least the ones that I was doing on the abomination that makes desolate, that it really opens up a whole lot more of a field of study for us to look at. And I thought I might tonight recap some of the points we've been looking at, and I've put on the DVD the 7 presentations. Carrie's already got one, so if you want some of the DVDs, I've called it Abomination Anti-Venom. How does that sound? Sorry, Lavanya. It's got it's not frolicking in the lilies, but we are dealing with some serious subjects here, and the abomination that makes desolate. And you'll remember that we looked at the original abomination in heaven and how it came down to earth, and the transfer through to what we see in the daily and the transgression of desolation, and then the human race being brought back to the ability to go back into the most holy place. And I thought that I just wanted to read to you one passage to give us some context, because it's quite profound, really. And I'm key to empowering the third angel's message, page 25, 24, 25. I just want to read this again because you can lose the significance of it. It's in Patriarchs and Prophets, page 364. And we need to think about this in terms of the path of human history that we have followed, and what God really desired for us and where he really wanted us to go. When your children become wayward, you have to go on a journey with them, whether you like it or not. If you want to save them, you have to go on their journey with them to save them. And this is indeed what's happened for our Father. But in course, as I mentioned in one of the presentations, because God follows where his children go, does he then become seen as one who has that type of character? If he's visiting the places where his children are going and trying to rescue them from those places, do we attribute to him those characteristics? And this is one of the problems that humanity is having with reading the Bible. And this is what it says: if man had kept the law of God as given to Adam after his fall, so this is after the fall, after the initial fall, preserved by Noah and observed by Abraham, there would have been no necessity for the ordinance of circumcision. So if there was no necessity, if they had have faithfully followed God's commandments, there would have been no need for the ordinance of circumcision. So what does that tell you that the ordinance of circumcision is?
Plan B.
It was needed by man.
It was needed by man to reflect back to him his sinfulness. in putting his trust in the arm of flesh. And so it was something that man needed. God never needed to give this to man, but man needed it. And so then it goes on, it says, and if the descendants of Abraham had kept the covenant of which circumcision was a sign, they would never have been seduced into idolatry, nor would it have been necessary for them to suffer a life of bondage in Egypt. So reading that sequence, why did they suffer a life of bondage in Egypt? What happened before that? They were seduced into idolatry. So it was their idolatry that led them to be placed in bondage within Egypt, and they never needed to go into Egypt. So it was never God's intention for his children to suffer the bondage of Egypt. He never wanted this for them, but because of their sinfulness, they ended up going down that path, and he walked with them. And then it goes on. They would have kept God's law in mind, and there would have been no necessity for it to be proclaimed from Sinai. Now that's starting to get a little bit serious, isn't it? Mm-hmm. No need for the Ten Commandments to be proclaimed from Sinai. That's
the old dispensation. What happens to the old dispensation that began at Mount Sinai then if there was no need for it? That blows everything out the water, doesn't it?
Doesn't it? In terms of the way Christianity views the covenants and understanding of the covenants, they're never needed, and this is what Wagner was teaching. The law and the word spoken there in Hebrews, it was actually repeated. The law was repeated. It had to be repeated in a way that man understood. And one of the presentations we looked at Sinai, the law was not spoken from Sinai until, and we should look at that, let's just remind ourselves in Exodus 19 and verse 8. So God promises to do all these things for Israel. And remember, we looked at Exodus 6 when God says, I will take you out of the land of Egypt. I will do all these wonderful things for you. And the children of Israel did not, what did it say? They did not hearken unto the voice of Moses for two reasons. Do you remember what they were? Exodus 6. Because of anguish of spirit, and cruelty of bondage. So if you're in cruelty of bondage and God offers to get you out and you don't listen, what are you actually doing?
Saying you want to stay in bondage.
You're rebelling.
But why would you rebel when someone is offering you freedom? They're being offered complete freedom from their bondage with no strings attached. Just believe me and I'll do this for you. And they won't listen to him.
The woman you gave.
The woman whom you gave to be with me. You put us in this bondage. And it's your fault that we are in this situation. That's why they wouldn't listen. They blamed God for their bondage when they were the ones that went into idolatry. This is a really, really big point.
But it seems to be when you're in that situation, you can't see out of it. You're actually captivated by it.
And this is the poison of the serpent, isn't it? The abomination that makes desolate. So, come to Exodus 19 and verse 8. God promises to do all these things and for them, and it says in verse 8, and all the people answered together and said, all that the Lord has said, we will do.
Interesting.
So they were basically saying, well, you can promise us all these things, but we're going to do it for you, to demonstrate to you that we are good people. And they wanted to demonstrate to God that they were good people. They were promising to obey someone that...
They were scared of.
Well, what did they say in Exodus 17?
hast thou brought us out here to kill us in the wilderness?
Yes.
Verse 3.
3. And the people thirsted there for water, and the people murmured against Moses, who was the representative of God. Wherefore is it this that thou hast brought us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our cattle with thirst? So all those miracles that they saw in Egypt, who are they accounting these to? Well, to God. So, so they're attributing all of this, what brought them out and what made them free, that they're going to be killed. So now they're promising, they are promising obedience to a being that they believe wants to kill them.
It's appeasement, isn't it?
Yeah, it's appeasement, isn't it?
Yeah. Which is idolatry.
Which is idolatry. Eddie.
They think they're thinking that God has an ulterior motive, and therefore they have to appease him. The ulterior motive is, you got us out of Egypt to kill us.
Yeah.
And now we need to appease you so that doesn't happen. Does that make sense?
Yes, we need to appease you. We promise to be good. We promise, don't hurt us. Don't, we'll do whatever you want us to do. Just don't hurt us. So.
Did they knew that they were called to come out and have a feast, 3 days journey, and that there would be a sacrifice of cattle because they couldn't do it in Egypt. And when they weren't allowed to do it, bad things happen in Egypt. So that seems to reinforce the fact that if you don't give him what he wants, he's going to get angry.
Yeah. So when they saw what happened to the Egyptians, and the fact that many of them were doing the same things as the Egyptians, I think that might have scared them a little bit.
Yeah.
That he might do the same to us. Interesting, isn't it? You going to say something, Gavin?
You said it.
Okay.
Amen.
Thou sayest. So it's interesting, isn't it? So we see a group of people that are quite fearful of God, and they're promising allegiance to him to be faithful and to do everything that he asks them to, well, that they think that he wants them to do, because they're afraid of him. Does this same process happen in Christianity? Don't most people believe that God has promised to burn to death everyone that doesn't do what he wants? So we have the same situation set up that, well, if you don't follow God and do the things that he wants, then you're going to burn, you're going to be destroyed. And so, the JMV law is for me too. Keep the morning watch, do mine as part. Care for my body, keep a level eye, walk soft in the sanctuary. Did you learn all that?
Keep a song on my heart.
Keep a song on my heart, go on God's errands. Yes, I promise God. It's oh Jesus, I have promised.
I'm glad they got rid of JMVs.
So, see how we can repeat. We can repeat this process. And as this is the process that the Israelites went through, it is a process through which God can save us, obviously. So I'm not saying it's... I'm not trying to criticise, I'm just saying that there could have been a better way than this. But we're still repeating the same processes because of our understanding of our Father's character. And this is the point that I wanted to jump over to. I guess I'm just doing a little bit of recapping here, but I just wanted to see if you could remember what were the ingredients of the original abomination. Do you want to walk through those briefly? 11. 11 points on page 11.
Begotten Son? Something like the first one?
A rejection of the begotten Son who inherited all things. Why is this the beginning of the abomination? What, in rejecting the begotten Son who inherited all things from his Father, what did that do to the angels? They began to deny that they had an inheritance because they They didn't worship the one who inherited all things, so they came to, as it says here, which led to rejection of life as a gift. That they, as Jesus has received all things and gives honour to the Father, as the Father has life in himself, so he's given to the Son to have life in himself. So Jesus is expressing gratitude and thanks to God, and as the one who is the author of faith, his gratitude and thanks becomes the fountainhead for all creation to give thanks to the Father. But once they rejected the begotten Son,
You're worshipping the Father.
sorry?
Then you are worshipping the Father, which means you have an image before you that doesn't submit, that has life in and of itself.
Then you are worshipping the Father directly.
Correct.
Yeah. Who doesn't?
You are trying to get the Son out of the way.
Yep. Because he doesn't obey anyone, submit to anyone, anything like that. And this led to the idea of inherent immortality. And we looked at all the quotes in here. We're just summarising here where Satan began to diffuse amongst the angels the idea that they had their own life. They didn't need to look to anyone else for guidance. And the idea that they had their own wisdom. Remember in Patriarchs and Prophets it says, lower orders of being may need laws to govern them, but we don't need those things. And so that was point number 4, which led to the theory that angels did not need laws to govern them. This is the sequence. Rejection of the begotten Son leads to the belief of I have my own inherent life, which leads to the rejection of law to govern, which makes God's law appear arbitrary. If you're completely dependent on God for life every moment, his laws are laws of life. Or as someone else has worded it, they are design law.
The law of breathing.
Yes.
Yeah, the law of eating.
The law of breathing, the law of eating, the law of heartbeat. They're laws, but they're design laws. So this is the sequence that we've followed. And it all stems from the rejection of the begotten Son. And that made God's law appear arbitrary, which caused Satan to declare that mercy was inconsistent with justice because beings of inherent wisdom do not need mercy. If you have sufficient wisdom to guide yourself, then there's no place for mercy, is there? Because you already have all the wisdom sufficient. Which means if you have sufficient wisdom and knowledge in yourself, and you do the wrong thing, by whoever the powers that be, your sin is unforgivable. This is what Satan was projecting. Every sin must be punished, urged Satan. Desire of Ages 761.4. Which made God appear that he could not be just and forgiving, which led to Satan to tell the angels that God would not forgive. And that was the tipping point, wasn't it? The tipping point where Satan saw that some of the angels were willing. First Spirit Prophecy Volume 1, page 21. Some of the angels are thinking, I think I want to go back to God. Up to nearly 50% of the angels, she says, sided with Lucifer, but God was saying, look, I'm willing to forgive you. And then that's when Satan pulled out his trump card and said, I know the law of God. God will not forgive you. You've gone too far. He won't forgive. And this is what leads us into our understanding of, and I want to shift gears a little bit here, and I'm going to throw some points out to you. With that kind of an understanding of falsifying God's character and all of these things, I'm just wondering if that's going to be too much of a jump. What I was wanting to do is to look at the cleansing of the sanctuary and how this relates to the cleansing of the sanctuary, but I just thought, maybe that's a bit of a leap. We could have a go.
See if we can land the plane. Give it a shot.
So, I need some chalk.
Left hand side, right hand, left hand side.
Ah, there it is. So,
As long as it doesn't squeak. So as long as it doesn't squeak.
As long as it doesn't squeak. I'll put it that way.
Do we need to move the camera?
I'm imagine it getting it.
No, it's not getting it. So we need to move the.
Thanks, Dan.
There we go. So we're fairly familiar with the we have the candlesticks with the points there and the table of showbread with the double crowning around the edge and oh, you made it. So the altar of incense. So I think we're all fairly familiar with those things there. So the point I want to come to is Daniel 8:14. And why is Daniel 8:14? Let's just think about this. Daniel 8:14. Is this a significant verse for Seventh-day Adventists?
Yes, it is.
Why is it significant? Well, because Ellen White said so.
Well, because
No, it's a prophetic movement.
It's what William Miller preached on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Midnight Cry.
Midnight Cry. That our movement began out of this statement, the declaration. Under 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. And a number of translations, when you read this, the sanctuary shall be cleansed. What's some of the other translations say on that particular verse? Sanctuary shall be justified.
The holy place declared right.
The holy place declared right. Okay?
Restored to its rightful state.
Restored to its rightful state. Just thinking about the sanctuary being restored to its rightful state. Okay? And just think about this for a moment. We have here at the heart of the most holy place the Ten Commandments. Now we come to Psalms 94 verse 7. What did Satan do to the law of God?
By law.
94 verse 20. Did you want to repeat that, Reuben?
Frames mischief by a law.
So which law did Satan frame mischief by?
The law that every transgression needs to be punished.
And which law is that?
That's the Ten Commandments, the
So
transgression of religion.
So did Satan work mischief with this law?
He distorted the character of God.
Okay. All right. So in distorting the character of God, which is
the Ten Commandments.
So the Ten Commandments is a transcript
of God's character.
Of God's character. That's in many, many places. Patriarchs and Prophets, Christ Object Lessons, several other places tell us that the Ten Commandments is a transcript of God's character. So in falsifying God's character, he changes the transcript of the law. And so in working mischief by a law, what does that do to the whole sanctuary? It puts it out of its proper setting, doesn't it? Does it pollute the sanctuary?
Definitely.
Takes a place that was supposed to give life and makes it a place of death.
Oh, where do we read that in the Bible?
Can't think of the text.
Romans 7. Romans 7. Let's go over to Romans
That's
7.
Right.
7:11.
That's convenient.
For sin, taking occasion by the commandment. Could you relate that to working mischief by a law? That's sin or Satan. You could put that in there. Taking occasion by the commandment deceived me, and by it slew me. Wherefore the law is holy, the commandment holy and just and good.
Verse 10.
And then verse 10. And the commandment which was ordained to life, I found to be unto death. So, you see how Satan's lies, which started with the rejection of the begotten Son, leading to showing that God's law is arbitrary, and then saying that God would not forgive, would change the law.
Unless you appease.
So, if you appease,
that would change the whole role of the sanctuary.
That would change the whole purpose of the sanctuary, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
To make it an appeasement-based system.
So you'd actually have to have a veil there, because otherwise you can't talk to God at all, full stop, because you're full of sin.
So in the light of that, this appeasement-based system, and we all understand what we're saying, because Satan is saying that God won't forgive you, and the only way that God is going to be satisfied is for someone to die, either yourself or a substitute to die in your place. Okay? So in order, and we'll see if we can capture this idea. In order for the sanctuary to be restored to its rightful place, let's come to Daniel chapter 9. What needed to take place?
Sacrifice and offering.
Daniel chapter 9. Verse 24 to start with. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and the prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Each one of those, each aspect of that is a full study on all of its own. But what else did he come to do? Verse 27, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause what? Sacrifice and oblation to cease. How does Jesus cause sacrifice and oblation to cease?
He'd realign the sanctuary and show its full potential, or show its full value.
Okay, good. We talked about, we'll expand that a little bit more.
So going from the visible to the invisible, showing them back.
Showing them back to
what God really is.
So Jesus came to show what God really is. And that leads us to John 17:4. When did the work of Jesus finish? Before he died or after he died? Before he died. So he says, I have finished the work which you gave me to do. So if he's finished the work, if he finished the work which God gave him to do, how does that cause sacrifice and oblation to cease? Because I was taught that once he died, that's what caused sacrifice and oblation to cease.
Wasn't the demonstration enough of all the stuff that he had done to show what God was really like?
So in order for the sanctuary to be restored, in order for it to be set in its rightful state, the law, which is a reflection of God's character, has to be set in a rightful state. And when Jesus came to reveal the character of his Father, he reset the law to its rightful state, which then would cause the principle of sacrificial atonement and appeasement-based penal substitution to cease, simply by revealing what God's character is like.
And he did that by offering forgiveness without sacrifice to all those that ask.
Forgiveness without
sacrifice.
Father, forgive them, and they know what they do before
in every story in the New Testament.
So the forgiveness was already there. Father, forgive them. After they offer a lamb on the altar, then forgive them.
At the time he was realigning it, he was still under the protection of God. And at the end of it, he'd finished the work, and then God turned around and said, there is my son, and they've lifted him up. So man's turned around and go, well, that's just not enough.
It's just not enough, is it?
No.
And this is where we come back to, remember, I think it's in the book here, Patriarchs and Prophets 137. Still the patriarch begged for some visible token as a confirmation of his faith, as an evidence to after generations that God's gracious purposes towards them would be accomplished. The Lord condescended to enter into a covenant with his servant, employing such forms as were customary among men for the ratification of a solemn engagement.
He met him where he was.
Sorry?
He met him where
He met him where he was. So how was the new covenant ratified?
He used the beliefs of their own people, really.
Wasn't the death of Christ what ratified the covenant?
Mm-hmm.
But why did it need to be ratified in that way? Was it like Abraham to condescend to?
People needed a visible
The
token.
people needed a visible token.
That they were.
Yeah. The Lord condescended to enter into covenant with his servant, employing such forms as were customary among men for the ratification of a solemn engagement. Can you see the parallel? Just opening up some thought processes here in terms of how the sanctuary would be made right, how it would be justified, and how Jesus did that. Because what we have been taught is that in the death of Christ, God's wrath is satisfied, and sins can then be forgiven, that the whole appeasement-based system is enthroned. But that's just confirming what Satan said. Without punishment, there can be no forgiveness of sins. There must be punishment in order for sins to be forgiven. Without the shedding of blood, there can be no remission.
But that's speaking to the carnal mind, isn't it?
Well, shall we look at it?
Without the shedding of blood, there can be no remission of sins.
Yeah.
So that once the sacrifice occurs, man believes he can be forgiven, only then to realise that it is the goodness of God that brings him to repentance.
Yeah. Is it? I can never. Is it Hebrews 8 or 9 or 7?
9.
Hebrews 9.
What's the text say again?
Without shedding of blood, there is no remission of sin. 22.
9:22.
9:22. And almost all things are, by the law, purged with blood, and without the shedding of blood is no remission. Now, remember what we read in the beginning. This is why I want to come back to this, what I was reading. I didn't get to finish this. In Patriarchs and Prophets 3:64. That if they'd have been obedient, there never would have needed to have been the giving of the law on Mount Sinai, etc. And then she says this, there would have been no need of the additional directions given to Moses.
Statutes.
None of it would have needed to have been given. The Bible would have been a lot smaller. That's interesting, isn't it? And this brings us to Psalms 40 verse 6, sacrifice and offering. Thou didst not desire. God didn't want sacrifice.
This interesting verse. Just look at this visible token, Ellen White. This is from Prophets and Kings, page 560. This is when the exiles return to Jerusalem. So the setting up of the altar of daily burnt offerings greatly cheered the faithful remnant. Hardly they entered into the preparations necessary for the rebuilding of the temple, gathering courage as these preparations advanced from month to month. They had for many years been deprived of the visible tokens of God's presence, and now, surrounded as they were by many sad reminders of the apostasy of their fathers, they longed for some abiding token of divine forgiveness and favor. Above the regaining of personal property and ancient privileges, they valued the approval of God. Wonderfully had he wrought in their behalf, and they felt the assurance of his presence with them, yet they desired greater blessings still. with joyous anticipation, they looked forward to the time when, with temple rebuilt, they might behold the shining forth of his glory from within. So
The need for visible tokens.
it mattered to them. It was really important.
So it's not enough for God to say to them, I forgive you. They need ratification, they need death, they need blood as evidence that God is willing to forgive them.
Are we any different?
Well, this happens in our human relationships all the time, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Invisible tokens. So I'm trying to open up to our thinking in terms of the cleansing of the sanctuary. What is the cleansing of the sanctuary?
Could I say it's the removal of the misapprehension of God?
Precisely. It's the correct understanding of God's character which cleanses the sanctuary because it restores the law to its correct understanding, which resets the whole sanctuary service in a completely different context. So, without a correct understanding of the character of God as revealed by Jesus while he was here on earth, you cannot understand what it means to cleanse the sanctuary. If Adventists had have understood what it means to cleanse the sanctuary, wouldn't we have been in heaven already? Mm-hmm. But obviously we don't understand what it means because we're still here and the sanctuary is not cleansed.
It's not only the heavenly sanctuary which is defiled, but
Okay.
the earthly sanctuary.
I was just thinking exactly that, Craig.
So-
Sorry. No, I was just thinking in the regards, as we've been discussing the judgment, and the previous understanding has always been that God is judging you. And we've shifted it to understanding that it's actually us judging God. Man is evaluating the character of God to determine who is this whom we worship. So the cleansing of the sanctuary, instead of being arbitrarily just looking at what's happening up there, it's our understanding of what's occurring in the sanctuary that's being cleansed in the most holy place, so that our understanding of what's happening up there is now clearer, based on that fact that there's never been any need for sacrifices in the heavenly sanctuary, because God did not desire sacrifice.
Our house is a house of prayer.
Thank you. That's exactly the point I was going to make. So, yep.
I was thinking I was just reading the history of the pioneers. So the fatal flaw the Adventists made, who never accepted the Sabbath, is that they made a mistake. They knew there was a mistake, but instead of accepting that the mistake had to do with the cleansing of the sanctuary, they thought the mistake had to do with the time.
Yes.
They kept changing the time, and they destroyed themselves.
Yes.
Because they refused to believe that the cleansing of the sanctuary was not the burning of the earth with fire.
Interesting, isn't it? Yes. Which it says something about the character of God.
Yes.
So that obviously has to be universal, not just global, because the universe had been influenced by Lucifer into accepting that this is what God's like. It's only until Christ demonstrated differently that it all went back.
To reconcile things in heaven and on earth.
Absolutely.
Colossians 1:20. So this what we're tying together is the declaration under 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed, is a central pillar and foundation of our faith. Great Controversy, page 409. But at the heart of that, the only way the sanctuary can be cleansed or set to its rightful state or restored to its rightful position is for a revelation of the character of God as he really is, so that we can actually understand what his law is, so that we can have it sealed into our foreheads. So you cannot cleanse a sanctuary in heaven or on earth until you have a correct understanding of the character of God. And that's why we've been here for so long, because we've not understood what the cleansing of the sanctuary means. And there has been some discussion. I've read many of the debates over the years in regard to, well, you know, the human heart, which is the sanctuary or the temple of the living God, 1 Corinthians 6:19 and 20, that when we are cleansed and there's no more sin coming from us going into the heavenly sanctuary, then Christ can stand up. And you're familiar, you remember all those things. But how do we stop sin going into the heavenly sanctuary when sin is a transgression of the law and the law is a transcript of God's character? If you have a wrong view of God's character, how can you stop sinning? You can't.
It's a fear-based system.
And if the cross of Christ, which was a condescension to meet man where he is, when Christ had already finished his work the night before, and he would have died in the garden, wouldn't he? So he would have died in the garden, but God condescended to meet us where we were, to give us an assurance through a blood sacrifice, so mankind could look upon the serpent justice, and believe that he could be forgiven. So,
We're relating that back to the brass serpent.
Yes.
Brass serpent. As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. Why must the Son of Man be lifted up as the serpent was lifted up? Because of our understanding of justice. And when you are coming towards the sanctuary, you're outside of the sanctuary system, your comprehension of God is every sin must be punished. Everyone who violates must be killed, must be destroyed. So,
as you approach the east gate, would be like all of Adam and his descendants approaching the east gate of Eden, where they held their sacrifices, and there stood an angel with a great sword in his hand. Why would you sacrifice? Because if you don't,
you get killed.
Another problem with this is that if you have that view of the character of God, you can't accept the Sabbath or more law because you're scared of more law. So the early Adventists, if they have the scary view of God, he's coming to judge the world. If we tell them, oh, we've been breaking all this law, you know, we need to have more law. No, we can't. Oh, it means we've been sinning. We deserve to die, just like everybody else. We thought that we were the few good ones, and everybody else needed to die. But actually, we were wrong. Oh, no. So we can't have more law. That can't be the problem. So.
But why then did Adventists multiply law and become dry as the hills of Gilboa before 1888? What allowed them to multiply law?
Yeah, I'm talking about the Sunday Adventists.
Oh, the Sunday Adventists, yes,
yeah.
Of course.
Once the Adventists accepted, so there's two
the
different...
Sabbath.
Yeah, so there's two different groups. The ones that don't, I guess,
yeah.
And the ones that do.
Well, they can't have more law because their God burns people in hell forever. So it's not going to work for them.
It's almost as though every generation's gone into the holy place, and that's where they've stopped, because they can't realign the sanctuary. So and they stopped at the veil because it was an appeasement-based system. Whereas now it's like the veil has been lifted, and the sanctuary is becoming more realigned because we realise what the character of God is.
So let's have a look. That's exactly it, Kerry. That we understand what the character of God is. So we're able to come into the most holy place because we have boldness to come into, because there's no more condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus, because we realise he doesn't condemn anyone, and that he reflects the Father. So let's have a look at what it was that allowed Adventists to come into the most holy place. It's the message to Philadelphia that allowed Adventists. Now, what is the message to Philadelphia? Verse 7, Revelation 3:7. And to the angel of the church of Philadelphia, which is brotherly love, write, these things says he that is holy, he that is true, he that hath the key of David. What's the key of David?
I love thy law. I meditate on it. That was David's key.
Okay, the key of David.
Allow him to have true repentance.
Yeah, interesting thoughts. Key of David. What was Jesus made of? Was he a son of David?
Yeah.
The root and offspring of So the key of David is he has our human nature. This is a key element of the key, and of course he reveals the law of God as it should be revealed.
That's Isaiah 22, it says, "And the key of the house of David will I lay upon his shoulder, so he shall open and none shall shut, and he shall shut and none shall open."
Does it have any more information there on what that key is? Or just that he has the key of...
Upon his shoulder.
It
That
was
just makes me
government.
think of Isaiah 9:6.
The government shall be upon his shoulder.
Yeah.
What was that verse from?
Isaiah 22:22.
Yes.
22:22.
Because verse 21 says, "I will clothe him with thy robe and strengthen him with thy girdle, and I will commit thy government into his hand, and he shall be a father to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and to the house of Judah."
And why does the subject of the nature of Christ help us to go into the most holy place?
Because he's a direct connection with the Father.
He's taken us into there with him.
Because he's taken us in there with him.
He's showing us that we can go in there with
Yeah.
him.
Because he has our nature upon him, purified, and he goes in before the Father. That's the key to get in. The key of David is that he bears our humanity.
It's 1 John 5:20, and we know that the Son of God has come and hath given us an understanding,
Or a
that we
mind.
may know him that is true, and we are in him that is true, even in his Son Jesus Christ.
That we may know him. That
This
is true.
the true God and eternal life.
True God. So 1 Corinthians 2:16 also, we have the mind of Christ. It all comes through the subject of the nature of Christ.
So once again, this key is relation.
It's a relational key. And what do you understand that means?
I can now go boldly before my Father through Christ. Christ has shown me that I can do that.
Because there's no
There's
condemnation.
no condemnation.
He's merciful, gracious, long-suffering, abounding in goodness and truth. How do we know that? Because he healed everybody. He blessed everybody. He loved everybody. He was merciful to everybody. Never killed anybody. Never burned anybody. Never speared anybody. Never did he do any of those things. That's why we know we can go in.
No.
Fiona.
The shoulder thing makes me think about Matthew 11. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I'm meek and lowly in heart, and you shall find rest in your souls. So that's how we go in, because we're next to Jesus.
Meek and lowly in heart.
Because we're in his yoke.
Yep.
We can change we can go into he wants us to go into.
Yeah. He wants us to come in. And so, I guess the summary point we're drawing out tonight is that the cleansing of the sanctuary can only take place with the restoration of an understanding of God's character. Because it's actually about restoring the sanctuary to its rightful place.
And will that restore our young people that run away because of the hypocrisy that they see in church?
It's interesting,
Yeah.
there's a link just back to keys in Matthew 16, which is interesting verses, isn't it?
Keys of death and hell.
Well,
No?
I say unto thee that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven.
Give unto them the keys of the kingdom.
This is Adrian, just one thing. This is from early writings regarding the key of David.
Just talk up.
This is from early writings. Preface, it says, in regards to, she's quoting Revelation 3:7-8, and she says, "It is those who by faith follow Jesus in the great work of the atonement who receive the benefits of his mediation in their behalf, while those who reject the light which brings to view this work of ministration are not benefited." Which is a relation back to those who followed Christ into the most holy place, got up with him and followed him in, and those who remained behind stayed by the altar.
And what is the atonement? Is it God satisfied by a bloody form of his Son?
No.
Does that form the atonement?
No, it's at one minute with the Father.
It's the revelation of the character of God by Jesus Christ that turns our hearts to believe that God can be merciful towards us. That's the atonement. And that work was completed before he died. So, but it was ratified in a condescending form for us to be able to appreciate and accept, just like Abraham did.
Well, prior to Christ dying, really, there was only one woman that actually saw it.
Mary Magdalene.
I was thinking the same thing, Craig, this whole time. Yeah.
I mean, it was after he'd laid his life down.
Yeah.
Then the others began to see it.
No one else saw it. Except this.
And as Peter preached on Pentecost, that preaching, you've killed the Son of God, pricked them in their hearts, and what really comes.
So there's an element in which human hearts can only seem to be brought into a rightful state through the death, that it pricks them. And God understood this.
But it's interesting, that verse we started in, or what we read in Hebrews
9:22.
How did it go? It says, and almost all things are by the law purged with blood.
What were the things
almost
that weren't?
All things.
That's interesting, isn't it? I hadn't thought of that.
Some things were purged by water and by ash, wasn't it?
Yeah, ash. Definitely by water.
Water and ash, I think they used. I'm not I failed everything in Levitical. Hyssop, yeah. Hyssop.
So it's because, and we're just summing up, we better sum up, we better finish up here. Because Satan, we just follow the sequence through, he rejected the Son of God, which caused him to see him as having life coming from himself, which made the law of God appear arbitrary and controlling, that this worked mischief, that caused mischief to make God's character appear arbitrary, controlling and tyrannical. Okay? And so Christ came to show what the Father is really like, and this is what restored this. It laid the foundation that he would seal up the vision to anoint the most holy, to bring in everlasting righteousness. All those things are laid out there. And again, the point is, when Jesus revealed the character of God 2,000 years ago, why didn't it end then? Why wasn't the sanctuary restored then?
I want to say because...
Slow of heart, yeah.
I want to say because in the holy place it was still covered in brass.
The holy place? There's no brass in the holy place.
I'm just saying...
In the courtyard, it's all brass.
So it's all brass and there was no gold that you could see through.
Okay, meaning?
So the veil was shut off basically, and they couldn't see through to the actual representation. They saw Jesus, but they're trying to relate it back to God.
So like Moses, when Jesus, in the glory that shone in his face, the people said, put a veil over your eyes.
Yeah.
It's too bright. And they pushed it away.
I think we're doing exactly the same thing as the children in the wilderness. All the Lord has said we will do. Just like the Laodicean, we're rich and increased.
Rich and increased with goods, have need of nothing.
John 1:11.
Yep.
He came unto his own.
His own received him not.
But didn't accept it.
So he wasn't accepted.
And his representation of the Father's character was not accepted.
But who was reconciled then?
In what context?
When we said, did anything, why didn't it all come to an end? Was there a reconciliation back at that time? Wasn't there a reconciliation in heaven?
Yeah.
Like didn't it truly reveal the character of God? So there was a reconciliation at that time, but because the prophecy of the 2,300 days is incorporated with that prophecy, the death of Christ upon the cross, God knew that it would take further time, just like it did in heaven, for the revelation of the character of Satan, for that system that you're talking about, that abomination, desolation, to fully manifest its character, that would not yet be revealed. The paganism and the abomination of desolation still had to manifest itself fully. That was not fully manifested yet.
So in the revelation of Christ's character, it caused a greater manifestation of the depravity of humanity. And so through the 7 churches, 7 seals, 7 trumpets, we see the process by which that seed manifested brings us up till 1844, when humanity then is ready to receive an opening into the most holy place, which is an ability to comprehend the character of God, in order that the sanctuary might be restored.
Sure.
Which has taken like 180 years from 1844 roughly.
Well, that's not bad.
And almost no one knows about it.
Yeah.
Took 2,300 years to get to here. Another 180 years. Well,
So the key point we're making is cleansing of the sanctuary can never happen without an understanding of the character of God as revealed by Jesus Christ. That's the take home.
You've seen me, you've seen the Father.
Seen me, you've seen the Father. All right.
Beautiful.
We'll say goodbye to our online audience.
And then we'll pray. Bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye.